Mm.
100% if I want.
Well, here.
You came back to us. You abandoned this side of the table. So it's gone.
I needed to provide balance, and we'll fix that imbalance tonight.
I think I'm imbalanced over here.
Lorna can hold down that whole
I'll
side.
hold it down.
She's held down a lot more than that side of the table.
Okay.
That's right.
Good evening, and welcome to the January 9, 2024 regular meeting of the Township Board for the Charter Township of Meridian. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Deputy Clerk Gordon, would you please call the roll?
Supervisor Jackson.
Here.
Clerk Guthrie.
Here.
Treasurer DeShane.
Here.
Trustee Hendrickson.
Here.
Trustee Sunland.
Here.
Trustee Wilson.
Here.
All board members present, sorry.
Thank you. On today's agenda, we have no presentations. And so we come to item 5, which is citizens address agenda items and non-agenda items. I have no green cards. Are there members of the public who wish to address the board at this time? Then we'll move on to item 6, which is the Township Manager's Report, today presented by Director Amber Clark.
Good evening, community, members of the board. While Manager Walsh is out and Manager Opsmer is out of office as well, I've been granted the opportunity to take on some administrative executive tasks for the office. So very excited to work with all the township staff and keep the ship afloat while we have our managers out of office. Some of the activities that have been new since the start of the year, our new Parks Director, Courtney Wazinski, has begun and is into her first full week. Managing the deer program falls into her purview, with archery members producing 141 deer and the police department staff producing 23 as of Monday. The Ms. Wazinski is also leading the way for the Marshall Park improvements, Central Park Pavilion improvements, and plans for Celebrate Meridian 2024. We have a new utility billing team member, Ms. Desiree Smith, who also joined the team on Monday and has been making introductions to the community and to staff. There are new no parking signs as a traffic control order that the board approved, I believe in December, and that was for Alderwood regarding Cornell Elementary and the safety of the students as they're exiting off of school campus. Members of the Okemos School District that utilize the area should be aware of the new order on Alderwood, as well as residents driving in Hazlet near the CN Railroad tracks will notice pedestrian crossing signs encouraging drivers to slow down and drive. The posted speed limit is 25, and it does go kind of aggressively from 35 on Hazlet Road to 25 right in that main intersection. And so it is a change, but we are working as a community to make sure that that's at the purview or the front view of drivers. There are several open board and commission seats for Meridian Township boards, Planning Commission, Downtown Development Authority, Economic Development Authority, Communication Commission, Land Preservation, Corridor Improvement Authority, and more. So if you are a member of the community and has been interested in some public service, there are opportunities for that. That application is online. We'd be happy to have your expertise and service on those boards. And finally, I believe we want to thank the candidates that came to the special meeting this afternoon as possible trustee appointment from this evening. We were very grateful for their time and their interest in being a part of our community and making us a great place to live and thrive. And if you have any questions about anything, let me know.
Okay. Item 7 on our agenda is board member reports of activities and announcements. Do we have any today? First of the year, things are going a little slow, or slower at least. Yes, Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. We have lots of activity in the clerk's office. I just want to remind folks at home, if they're listening, if they have applied to be on the permanent mail ballot list and they received a presidential primary selection form from our office, this gentle reminder to submit those forms before next Friday. We have to send ballots out next Friday to all the people on the list. And if, by law, if we've sent the forms to you and they haven't been returned to us, by law, we have to contact each person who hasn't submitted those forms back to us. So we would appreciate not having to make so many phone calls and emails and mailings. It would really help us smooth things out in the clerk's office. We've received about 4,000 and there's another 5,000 out there lingering. So if you hear this and you have that form at home, like I do, please fill it out and submit it to the clerk's office.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Clerk, Trustee Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. Tomorrow evening, there's going to be an important meeting about the Okemos Public Schools, specifically about Hiawatha Elementary. There's a proposal that the school board is putting forth to create a new entrance into the Hiawatha Elementary campus. And it's a public safety issue, and it's an issue of safety of our kids. And as you may know, I've been working with Captain Grillo and Ingham County Commissioner Mark Polsdorfer, school board member Katie Kavanaugh, and others on school safety since August. And so we are going to be a part of that meeting. There's some dissent from the neighborhood as to whether that entrance is important, but we support the school district in that it is necessary to get traffic off of Jolly Road and get traffic to route to a longer car line where cars will not be stacked on the street. So if you're interested, that meeting is at 6 p.m. tomorrow evening at the high school library. 6 p.m. at the library at Okemos High School. Thank you.
Thank you.
Real quick for the record, Chief Grillo,
What did I say?
Captain.
Oh, Captain, I
Just want to make sure
demoted
it's correct in the minutes.
you? Bad. Sorry.
Mr. Duchesne.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. Just want to announce that on December 20th, the CATA Board of Directors met and approved the request put forth by Economic Director Clark from the CIA to participate in our CIA Corridor Improvement Authority tax increment financing that will be used to redevelop the Meridian Township Grand River Corridor. CATA knows that the number one bus runs down our corridor, and they were glad to participate in helping to revitalize the corridor, and in particular for the major work that's be done to redevelop the Meridian Mall. So thank you, CATA.
Others? Then we'll move on to item 8 on our agenda, which is approval of the agenda. Mr. Duchesne.
I would like to move to approve the agenda with the following change. Moved action item 12B, Township Trustee appointment to action item A, and then move ordinance 22308 to item B.
Support.
We have a motion to support approval of the agenda from Treasurer Duchesne, supported by Clerk Guthrie. All in favor of the motion to approve the amended agenda, please say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Chair votes yes, and the motion passes, I presume. All right, we come to our consent agenda. A consent agenda, as usual, includes communications, minutes of our December 12, 2023 regular Township Board meeting, December 14, 2023 special Township Board meeting, December 18, 2023 special Township Board meeting, the typical board bills, and Item 9D is ratification of a new firefighter EMT appointment. And the appointee is Joshua Hingebach. Is there motion? Mr. Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I move the consent agenda as presented this evening.
Support.
Moved and supported. The consent agenda. Any comments? Then we will need a roll call vote to pass that.
Supervisor Jackson?
Yes.
Clerk Guthrie?
Yes.
Treasurer DeShane?
Yes.
Trustee Hendrickson?
Yes.
Trustee Sunland?
Yes.
Trustee Wilson?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Item 10 is questions for the attorney. We have none tonight. 11 is public hearings. We do not have public hearings scheduled tonight. Item 12B now is the township trustee appointment. 12A is township trustee appointment. And as the public may know, the township has, as soon as I find it, been in the process of trying to fill the trustee's position left by Courtney Wizinski. The township board has instituted a process December 12th, where we took applications from the public and reviewed all of those applications, came up and developed a three-person group to interview. Those full board interviews occurred today at 4 o'clock, and 3 of the applicants were interviewed. They were Mark Bloomer, oh, please, I'm so sorry. Mark Bloomer, who many of us know from our planning commission at this point, Angela Demas, and Peter Trezise. The table is open now for discussion, and Trustee Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I move to appoint Peter Trezise as Meridian Township trustee for a term of January 9, 2024 to November 20, 2024.
Support.
Supported by Mr. DeShane. Trustee Wilson, please.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. We had an interesting couple of hours interviewing candidates for the open trustee position that was left vacant when Courtney Wizinski became our Director of Parks and Recreation. I will say, having been in all of those interviews, that I was extremely impressed with Mr. Trezise's knowledge base, his service to the community in the form of being on the Brownfield Redevelopment Fund, Brownfield Redevelopment Commission, Zoning Board of Appeals, years on the Planning Commission, and those things really spoke to me because I believe you have to have a foundation in order to effectively work on this board. Many of us have had 4 years on the Planning Commission, which has added to our ability to function in this role. So for those reasons, I am putting forward Mr. Trezise.
Okay. Mr. DeShane.
Along with Trustee Wilson's support or ideas, I was also very impressed with Mr. Trezise. We asked questions about significant progress to all 3 candidates, and Mr. Trezise went on and listed 6 different items that were remarkable, and I agree with all 6 of them. He also has a lot of experience on school boards and understands the township governance model that we work under, which is we set policy, the manager implements it. His board experience will be of significant help and contribution to this board should he be appointed. He also has 5 years on the Planning Commission, and that's significant, understands the zoning issues, and a lot of the work that this board does is to take the work of the Planning Commission and validate it or repeal it, but we need board members that really understand zoning, because land use is very important, particularly in this era of redevelopment. He also seemed to get that redevelopment is our new challenge. For the past 50 years, development has been the number one cutting edge for Meridian Township. Well, we are developed. Very few parcels are left, and now it's up to us to redevelop it as well. He seemed very well versed on the issues that we're dealing with. Clearly, he's been paying attention to what we've been doing, and I think he'll be able to join the board with barely missing a beat, because he knows the issues that we're handling week in and week out. For those reasons, I support Mr. Trezise.
Other board members? Mr. Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I'll join my colleagues in supporting Peter Trezise to join the Township Board. I was impressed with all three candidates. I think all three candidates brought forward a unique perspective to their interview about how the township runs. And I was very pleased that we've got such a wealth of talent here in the township that we could have not just the three that we chose to interview, but really all 8 applicants were excellent. And I was very pleased to have been a part of the subcommittee to review those. I think one of the things that Mr. Trezise mentioned was his experience with at the foundation of the current senior center in Chippewa Middle School. One of our top 5 goals that we'll be talking about later on this evening is centered around this idea, this vision that the board has of a community and senior center, a new one with the impending demolition of the current Chippewa Middle School. And I think having someone on the board who has been through the process of opening up a senior center will be tremendously beneficial as we move forward with that. I also I agree with Treasurer DeShane's comment that I think what he had mentioned in terms of the significant impact that we've had over the last 4 years shows that he's been very deeply paying attention to what it is this board has been up to. And I think that will help him to seamlessly integrate into our board. And I liked particularly also the comment about not requiring unanimity, but also requiring consensus. I think that's a mantra that this board has been following, whether we've said it as eloquently or not, since I joined a couple of years ago. So for those reasons, I'll be supporting Peter Trezise to join the board.
Okay, thank you. Other comments? Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I too support the motion for Peter Trezise to the Township Board. I was also impressed by all 3 candidates and their responses. 2 of the candidates stood out in regards to their response regarding policy and the importance of policy. And I think Peter eked out the other candidate in the answer of that question in regards to the direction that the board provides the manager and the relationship that the board has with the manager. And so another question really stood out to me in response, in an answer response that he gave regarding the importance of public input and creating an action plan and feasibility study for a senior center. And so while all 3 candidates I thought were excellent candidates, for those 2 responses in particular stood out for me, especially because I'm consistently looking at policy in my role as clerk. I highly value that, and so for that reason, I too support Peter Trezise.
Trustee Sunderland, you have comments to add?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Supervisor. Gosh, this is a really difficult decision because we have 2 candidates that have a wealth of background and planning commission experience, and so it's a tough decision, and yet we also have an applicant that is, would provide maybe some new perspective, because she is from the outside, but she also has a foundation. She's just graduated, so I think I would probably support Angela Dumas, because I think that she would provide some fresh perspective, some new energy to the board, and I think that that she just would kind of move things maybe forward a little bit as far as ideas and new ideas. So anyway, I think I would be supporting Angela, so.
All right. I would add that there were no reasons not to support any of the three. They all offered interesting contributions to the board that we have and possibilities. In this instance, though, I will choose to support what appears to be the majority of the board, Mr. Trezise, for this appointment. And so if we take a vote at this point.
Sorry, I forgot one other thing.
Okay, please.
Which is to say, I think it's worth pointing out as acting manager, oh my God, now I'm doing it. Clark, it's the title change. That's what got me. As acting manager, Clark pointed out, we have a number of vacancies on boards and commissions right now. And I think that while I agree that a fresh perspective would be very welcome on this board, and I think would be very valuable, I also think that there's room to get involved in other ways that will prepare you for the next time something like this comes up. And I think that's what pushed the difference for me. I came and applied for a board position in 2018, in December of 2018, the one that ironically Courtney Wazinski was appointed to. And I was not selected at that time. And I joined the Planning Commission and served on that body for 3 years before another position became available. And so I would say that, there's plenty of room to get involved. The Planning Commission, if that's something that, our other applicants are interested in, I think that's a great place to get involved in the township affairs and learn all about the very complicated issues that come up in front of us, and really get a feel for township governance. And I would very much recommend getting involved in other ways, if not here on the board.
Mr. DeShane.
Thank you. I'd like to follow up on Trustee Henderson's comments. I too had applied for the board in 2012, not to this board, but to 44,000 voters, and they said no thanks. And so I didn't join the board in 2012, but I did get involved, and I volunteered on board and commissions, including the ZBA, which is no picnic if you've ever been on that board. It's a lot of hard work trudging through difficult choices, but it really prepared me well for 2016 when I did join the board. And I would encourage, really, I agree with Trustee Sunland, a fresh perspective is very good for this board, and I would encourage you to get involved in the township and various boards and commissions. We have lots of openings, and not to take this as a no thank you and go away, but no thank you now, but please stay involved, because we need you as part of the Meridian Township government. We need lots of perspectives, particularly on new fresh ones. And as for Planning Commissioner Bloomer, this was tough for me because you brought to us a lot of experience and an incredible commitment to public service. I know you've tried to retire from public service 3-4 different times, and they wouldn't let you. And the fact you came back and wanted to join the board, I'm really honored that you applied. Your service is exceptional, and you would have also made a very, very good board member, so thank you for your application.
Other comments? So at this time, we could take a roll call vote. Ms. Gordon?
Clerk Guthrie?
Yes.
Treasurer DeShane?
Yes.
Trustee Hendrickson?
Yes.
Trustee Sunland?
No.
Trustee Wilson?
Yes.
Supervisor Jackson?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-1.
Okay, and the motion that we just voted on was to appoint Peter Trezise.
5-1, sorry.
5-1.
5 to 1. Thank you. We move on now
Madam
to,
Supervisor,
yes,
can we just talk about what the outcome of this vote will mean when our new trustee will be seated?
sure.
So that'll be at our next meeting on January 23rd.
All right,
Thank you.
we'll be back to full board. Thank you all for your participation in our process. So now item 12B is ordinance 2023-08-CV, Conservancy District Updates, final adoption. And this will be led by Director Schmidt.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. The board last reviewed this at their December 5th meeting, and at that time introduced it with an intent to adopt. Staff was directed to publish the notice of intent to adopt in a newspaper general circulation. However, given the time frame of the December meetings, we weren't able to do it in time for the next meeting, so that's why it's back to you now. Just as a reminder, the Planning Commission has reviewed this previously, recommended unanimous approval. Been no major concerns raised. The change to the ordinance would functionally it would make two changes. Decks would be permitted by right, which is currently not the case in floodplain, the CV district, which causes some consternation and an extended period of time for a homeowner, even after they might have gotten state approval. Additionally, there will be an allowance for administrative approval of very small fills of 10 cubic yards or less. This is consistent with how we treat erosion around the lake. If there's 10 cubic yards or less, that it can be done administratively. Outside of that, this is a pretty straightforward one, and we would recommend approval at this time.
Mr. DeShane?
A question, Director Schmidt, are you finding you're getting a fair number of issues that have to come before the Planning Commission and the board that should be handled administratively, in your opinion?
So, under this ordinance, it's not a lot, but the ones that do are extremely time consuming. Because the homeowner has to go through the Army Corps and the state first before they even get to us. By the time they get to us, they're pretty done and would really like to just build their deck or make the small fill. Because what we're seeing, especially in some neighborhoods, only a corner of the house is in the floodplain. And so if they make this like 5 cubic yard fill, they're able to get off flood insurance. And so it's a monetary issue. One of the very first things I had here was one that had been going on for about 18 months. And obviously COVID affected that. But it's those kinds of things that there's no reason, once a lot smarter people than I have looked at this, for us to not approve these administratively.
Mr. DeShane?
I move to adopt text amendment number 2023-08 to amend Article 4 of the zoning ordinance of the Charter Township Meridian to update the standards of the CV Conservancy District.
Support.
Supported by Trustee Hendrickson. Mr. DeShane?
It really helps on these, and this is a new thing that we've gotten under Director Schmidt, is when we do get a staff recommendation on issues like this for these zoning changes, we appreciate your feedback and what staff is experiencing and why this is a good policy. We're not up there every day. We are the policymakers. We have to set the policy, but we're not on the ground, and you are, so thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Information. For that reason, I made the motion.
Okay. Others? I have one question. Mr. Schmidt, so you noted that an applicant would have to go to the Army Corps and the DEQ before coming to the township for permission, which suggests that the Army Corps of Engineers and Eagle would have had to approve before the applicant comes to the township for approval. Is that correct?
Correct, we actually
So none
asked,
of that has changed.
no, we actually asked them to provide a copy of the permit prior to us accepting it, because what happens is, if we get it before that, it kind of sits there, because our concern is taking something forward. It's more related to wetlands, but it also applies to floodplains. Taking something forward, getting it approved by the planning commission and potentially the township board, and then the state coming in and saying, well, no, it actually needs to be this under federal guideline, federal regulation. So, by us being the last ones in, it's really just making sure everything's done properly and going forward.
And the point of contention is how the soil is removed and infill is done to replace that from the township's perspective, and certainly that the township understands how that's being done.
Yeah, any fill in the floodplain is something that we need to be aware of to maintain our certification under the federal flood insurance program. If for some reason we get a black mark against us and we were to drop out of that program, that would have a major financial impact on every homeowner that's in the floodplain in the township.
Okay? Thank you.
Scott had a comment.
Scott,
Oh, thank you.
did you?
Scott.
He said no.
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so the motion has been made. That was Mr. DeShane and
Mr. Hendricks.
Mr. Hendrickson. Motion is to adopt text amendment number 2023-08 to amend Article 4 of the zoning ordinance of the Charter Township of Meridian to update the standards of the CV Conservancy District. All in favor of the motion, please say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Chair votes yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Smith. Item 12C is the 2023 goals review and 2024 goal setting. And tonight that will be presented to us by Director Clark, acting,
Yes, acting deputy manager this evening.
acting deputy manager, okay.
Apologies, okay. So at our last meeting in December, the 2023 goals review and the 2024 goals and action plan were presented for the first time to the board. Together is a vision and a work for community stakeholders to determine the feasibility of our multi-generational community senior center, enhance public safety, expand DEI, complete Phase 2 of MSU to Lake Lansing Trail, determine the use of the Central Park Pavilion, install our 5th solar array, enhance wetland protection, implement Phase 1 of the water meter replacement program, seek funding for a second recycling center, and enhance the township's communication outreach for 45,000 residents. I've been instructed by our manager that if there are any other edits from the board members on goals this evening, that we will take those. But these are our goals review and our goals action plan for 2024.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. Under Community Senior Center, which I'm spearheading as the chair of the task force for this, I'd like to broaden in the first sentence who our partners are going to be, and rather use this sentence. In 2024, Meridian Township shall work in collaboration with professional and community resources, to determine the feasibility of a new multi-generational community senior center. I think the language that is in here right now is too narrow. So I would like to broaden that out because we are indeed bringing in a professional team starting on February 7th? think it's February 7th, at our next meeting, we'll be bringing, not our next meeting, we have a planning session for that, and then we'll be bringing them in to work with the task force on the subject of how we go about doing community engagement, looking at financial resources, bonding, all the issues associated with this, where we're going to locate the project, whether we can redevelop or build new. We have a lot of issues to decide on this front, so I would like to see us broaden the language on this, please.
First, could I ask you to point us to where you're,
I'm in the top 5 goals section. The first goal being enhanced public safety, and the second being the community senior center.
okay? And your comment,
My comment is to change the clause that reads, if I can bring it up. Change the first clause in 2024, Meridian Township shall collaborate with professional and community resources, comma, to determine.
okay. Any comments about that?
No objection.
Objection?
Thank you.
Okay. By consensus, apparently, we agree that, that change should be made. And item 2, Community Senior Center.
Yes, yes, correct.
Okay.
That will be added.
Okay. Anything else? Mr. DeShane?
You know, I wasn't a real big fan of the third one, but the more I look at it here, I'm glad we included it. Citizen outreach and enhancement, citizen communications. One of the best things this board did last year was have our listening sessions. We got great feedback from our residents, and we heard lots of what their concerns are. We saw how important roads are to our residents and how frustrated they are that their roads aren't being done sooner, or issues with the county road department and where their work cuts off and where ours begins. We also got good feedback on the senior center, community center idea. It was really valuable. So reaching out, being very proactive to reach out to our citizens is an important thing. We like to think that, well, they can come to any board meeting and have their input there, but you know, our residents are raising families, they're working hard, they've got lives of their own. Can't really expect them to show up here and be really articulate and explain all the counterpoints or more asking all the right questions. It's much better if we go out to them. Here's what we're discussing. Here's what's going on. We want your feedback. That's what we did. And it worked out very well. So I'm glad we've included it as a goal. The fourth goal, diversity, equity, and inclusion, is a really important one. I'm glad it's on here. We've needed DEI training for a while. And we really need to update our personnel handbook and job descriptions. As a manager here, having recently hired someone and found the job description really out of date, this is an important goal. I'm looking forward to us not only making progress on this, but getting this done in 2024. So I support the rest of the goals as well as the amended change that Trustee Wilson made.
Mr. Hendrickson?
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I know that a lot of work from the staff goes into these, not only in the preparation, but also in the execution that comes later. And I think that we have here a list of 5 top goals that that are ambitious, but achievable, and that I think are representative of the values of the community. I think that Treasurer DeShane covered several of them very well, and as did Trustee Wilson. Obviously, one of the things we heard most about at our listening sessions was the emphasis on public safety, and making sure specifically that we are patrolling our streets and keeping our community safe, and safe on the road, which is what we heard a lot about as well. And I think that we've already taken some action last month to create the new program, the retention and recruitment program, that I think will pay dividends this year in bringing in high qualified candidates to fill those vacancies that we do have. And I think that we are putting our police chief and our fire chief in a spot where they can be successful in those recruiting efforts. And so now it's a time to execute on that and fill those positions. I agree that the outreach was an important addition to what was presented to us in early December. And also, I think, we've got a very ambitious goal to have a commitment to environmental sustainability and to convert the township's energy use to 100% renewable sources by 2035. It's, a new solar array on a fire station is not the most headline-grabbing goal. But being able to say that we are taking active steps year after year to increase or to decrease our carbon footprint is an incredibly important goal. And that combined with seeking to have a second recycling center that's in the central location in the township, a more accessible location, I think, that is an incredibly important addition. And so I'm very pleased that we made sure to include that as well.
Okay. Anyone else? Clerk Guthrie?
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. In regards to item 4, diversity, equity, and inclusion, we have 2 events listed there, Pride Celebration and Celebrate Meridian. We also have other important events as well, so I'm not sure why some of the events are included and some aren't. So when we talk about Juneteenth, or we talk about the Heritage Festival and the importance of the heritage of this community and where we came from, I think those are inclusive DEI type of events where we're talking about an overall group of people in the community that our events are representing all members of the community, not particular members of the community. So I would like to see, Juneteenth and the Heritage Festival included in that, or maybe a focus on making sure that we include these types of events or something without discluding that from diversity, equity, inclusion, because it is something that I would like to make sure that this township continues to have, is the Juneteenth events and the Heritage Festival event as well. And it would be nice to have the board be behind that in a goal that we support having those 2 events as well. In regards to DEI training, I think I expressed this at the last board meeting that I was very disappointed in the lack of DEI training. And I want to make it clear that I was not directing those comments at our HR director in any way, shape, or form. I know that the direction of this board is directed to the manager, not to the directors. I understand that. I know what that relationship is. And so if anyone misunderstood that, I want to make it clear that there was no, that was not in the direction of the HR director. I am disappointed in the lack of DEI training in 2023. There was maybe 1 or 2 trainings. I would like to see, when we say expand our DEI training, I don't know what that means. Expand DEI training from 1 training last year to 2 trainings this year. From what is our goal for expanding DEI trainings? Is it monthly? Because last year I expected monthly as a staff person / I'm here every day. Phil and I are here every day in the office as directors in our day capacity. I expected monthly DEI trainings. And so I was disappointed to not see monthly DEI trainings. And the manager apologized at the last meeting, stating that that was his fault for not having the DEI trainings. So I would like to be clear in number 4 of what the expansion of DEI trainings is. Or do we expect monthly? What does expand mean to the board, so that I have if we're giving an evaluation for the manager at the end of the year, I'm able to actually give an evaluation and say, the expectations of the board were met because we had an expansion of DEI. Well, one more DEI training isn't really an expansion for me. It would be more than that. So I don't know if the board has had any other thoughts on what they thought the expansion of DEI training means in number 4. So I thought I would just pose that question to other board members to make sure that we were all on the same page so that there's a clear expectation of what expansion of DEI training meant. I think Trustee Wilson's been popping her hand out.
Okay. Trustee
Thank you.
Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. In the action plan on page 51, you can see that there are a number of clauses related to DEI, again, nonspecific, as to training once a month or whatever. But I think we have to keep in mind, we're a policy body. We are not the implementers of this DEI updates and changes. So I want to stay in our lane, and that's why I think the language is sufficient for our, for the clause that we have here for DEI. The other thing, oops, see, now I've lost my place.
And what did you think about the events?
The events, I think those say such as, they're just examples of things we do. So if you added the clause at the end and others, you cover everything that we do for DEI purposes. So that would be my suggestion, just add those 2 words and then we cover everything we work on for that. Otherwise, you're gonna have a list a page long of all the activities that we're doing.
That was the other concern.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay?
Mr. Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I think no matter what we do with regard to listing events or anything like that, we're always going to miss something.
Right.
And so if we're going to make a change to that, to make it more indicative of what so we don't leave something out, if we don't pick and choose, maybe we say something like, we'll focus on events that celebrate the rich diversity of our community, period. No events listed, but we are celebrating them. And that way we avoid calling out one or the other. And we don't have a list a page and a half long. With regard to the DEI training, I agree with Trustee Wilson that being more specific can get into a problematic area. And I also am cognizant of the fact that updating the personnel handbook, updating the job descriptions, and really making sure that we're able to hire to fill our police department is going to keep our HR department incredibly busy over the course of 2024. I agree this is important, and we must do more than what was done in 2023, which was effectively little. But monthly might be too big of a bite to chew. And I think it's important for the manager and the HR director to get together and come up with an action plan for how to implement and roll out a more effective DEI training schedule. Maybe that looks like quarterly. Maybe it does look like monthly. I don't know. But I do trust the 2 of them to sit down and be able to work out something. If we tell them we want more, I think that's enough.
Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I like what you said a lot, with the events. I don't think we should list them. What if all of the events were included in one event? Something maybe every weekend is taken up in June by all the other communities, and we need to say, hey, let's put all of these in one day or 1 month or something, and then they're all tied to all these events that we listed. So I like the verbiage that you gave for the events, and I also like the verbiage that you gave for DEI training, that we direct the manager to work with the HR director to develop a plan for DEI training and, I don't know, come back to the board or, and implement that plan. I like that better than expand DEI training than what we have here. So I really like, not that you proposed it, but I like what you said, and I think it sounds better than what we have here. And for me, it's something that's more tangible, that that's a clear expectation than what we have here. don't know if anyone else.
Ms. Clark, do you,
Would you like goal number 4 to say in 2024, so trustee Hendrickson said, focus on events that celebrate the rich diversity of our community. So that would be
Yes.
the second sentence.
Yes.
So in 2024, expand our DEI training and update our personnel handbook and job descriptions. Focus on events that celebrate the rich diversity of our community.
Yes.
You can do that. Okay.
So how does it read now, please?
So the full goal
Yes,
is
please.
number 4, in 2024, expand our DEI training and update our personnel handbook and job descriptions. We will also focus on events that celebrate the rich diversity of our community.
Good.
okay, I would just add that I actually like number 5 and the way number 5 was written. So in a way that all of many of the individual projects that we want to see move forward and continue or become implemented are placed under the value of sustainability for the whole township. And so I compliment the writer on that strategy.
It wasn't me.
I compliment the writer on that strategy. Okay, we're at a point where, are there further comments, additions? So you're not asking here for our adoption or approval.
Yes, tonight action item is adoption of the goal. Is the adoption of the goal. Sorry, I apologize, I did not make them. Yep, it says move to adopt the attached 2024 Meridian Township Top 5 Goals and Action Plan.
Oh, I see, okay. So, trustee Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. Since we've made some changes, I'm going to monkey with the wording a little bit, but I move to adopt the attached 2024 Meridian Township Top 5 Goals and Action Plan as amended in board discussion.
Support.
Been moved and supported by trustee Hendrickson and clerk Guthrie to adopt the top 5 goals and action plan as amended. All in favor of the motion, please say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Chair votes yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yep, good job.
The next item on our agenda is 12D, Payment Reduction Program. I'm sure that doesn't mean much to any of us besides the presenter, who's Mr. DeShane.
Thank you very much, Madam Supervisor. This came to my desk last week, first day back. I got a email from the county treasurer, Alan Fox, saying that this was going to be mailed to us, certified mail, and we needed to take action in the next 2 weeks. So before you is this Ingham County Payment Reduction Program. When someone's taxes go delinquent and they get turned over to the county treasurer immediately imposes a 4% interest penalty and 1% a month. Those penalties only increase as the years go on to the point where there can be 25% of the outstanding taxes owed are, in addition to the taxes, there's 25% additional fees and interest and fees added onto it. The county treasurer has the ability now to waive those fees that he would collect or the county would collect. It does not impact the township at all. But it's only eligible for those citizens that have applied for poverty exemption. So people that come to our Meridian Cares office or to his foreclosure prevention office and are eligible now for the poverty exemption, which Michigan state law allows for citizens to receive, and they receive that exemption, they can get their taxes rescinded. And now with this payment reduction plan, all the outstanding fees can also be waived by the county treasurer. As it says in the memo, this will in no way impact the fees that we collect here in Meridian Township. We do collect a 1% interest penalty for summer taxes from September 14th to February 28th, and we collect a 1% for winter taxes on February 15th until the 29th. After that point, in this case, February 29th, everything after that gets turned over to the county. There's no more local taxes collected. So the fees that we collect will not be impacted. The fees that the county treasurer collects are significant, and it's a real hardship for someone who now has a poverty exemption. They've got their taxes waived, but now they've got all these fees. This payment reduction program that the county treasurer is asking us to approve would eliminate those fees without us impacting the county. Why we have to approve it even though it has no impact on us, I don't know. But MCL Section 2011-7B, subsection G8A requires that. So it's a pro forma. I could almost put this in the consent agenda, but then people say, what is this thing? We never had this before in the consent agenda. So again, the impact is none for the township revenue. It will be helpful for those few citizens in our township who are eligible for and receive the poverty exemption, which reduces their property tax by 50% or 100%, depending on what level of poverty they're at. So with that introduction, I'm going to move for Meridian Township to participate in Ingham County Treasurer's Payment Reduction Program for delinquent interest, penalties, and fees.
I'm not supporting, I'm asking a question.
Support.
Okay. Mr. DeShay.
So this is simply a pro forma that we need to do to allow the county treasurer to waive these fees for Meridian Township voters, or Meridian Township taxpayers that end up in a possible foreclosure situation where their taxes have been turned over to the county treasurer. And after 3 years, property is foreclosed upon, a citizen can lose their home for lack of payment of property taxes. He doesn't want that to happen. He has 4-person staff to prevent that from happening. This is a tool to help that from happening as well.
Let me go to Trustee Wilson at this point.
So what I'm hearing you say is that the county treasurer can make a unilateral decision to waive the penalties, being interest rates and so on, for taxpayers. We have no say in that, and yet we are being asked to participate. So how are we participating?
No, let me try and say, I didn't explain that properly to you. The county treasurer can waive the interest and fees for citizens come to them who now has a poverty exemption. So that has waived their property taxes.
So is the poverty exemption done here in
It is done
Meridian
here.
Township? That's the missing piece
Yes.
again.
They
Okay.
have to first meet the poverty exemption, which is a
Thank you.
very high
Now it's
standard.
clear.
We might want to revisit that. This board looked at that 2 years ago when we raised our income limits a bit. And what often disqualifies people from that is the asset limit, because if you have almost any assets at all, it disqualifies you.
Yeah.
Some Washtenaw County townships have said typically the assets are 100% of the poverty level. They've raised that to 6 and 8 times the poverty level, so that a person can keep their car or can keep other personal goods and still be eligible for it. They've got no income, but a car can disqualify for them for this. But yes, the key thing is they have to get that poverty exemption. Then you can take action
Thank
to
you.
help them to keep their home.
Thank you.
Okay, the Trustee Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. This is a worthy program. It may not affect very many residents, but the ones who are impacted by it, this will help them a lot. And so I think this is an opportunity for us at no cost to the township to be able to further extend a benefit to our residents that the county treasurer is offering. The real, the only entity that will be impacted financially is the county. And they're doing okay. So this is a no-brainer to me. This is easy to support.
Anyone else? So we're clear now?
We're clear.
We're clear. The motion is for Meridian Township to participate in the Ingham County Treasurer's Payment Reduction Program for delinquent interest, penalties, and fees. All in favor of the motion, please say, or maybe we should do a roll call vote on this.
Fine.
Ms. Gordon?
Trustee Sunland,
Yes.
trustee Wilson,
Yes.
supervisor Jackson.
Yes,
Clerk Guthrie,
Yes.
treasurer DeShane.
Yes.
Trustee Hendrickson.
Yes.
thank you. Thank you, Mr. DeShane. And we move now to our board discussion items. 13A is ordinance 2024-01, rezone 4660 Marsh Road from professional office of PO to C1 commercial. Mr. Schmidt.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. So the request in front of you this evening, this is a bit of an oddball. So property at 4660 Marsh Road currently has two buildings on it, one of which is occupied with a number of users. It's changed over the years. The property was actually rezoned a few years ago to its current designation of PO. Although the future land use map calls for multifamily uses on the site. And I'm actually going to scroll down here a few pages. Apologies that I'm moving your screens, but there is a page down here that better shows this. So here we go. This is the property we're talking about. Future land use map shows multifamily residential in this entire area. That's been the case since prior to the 2017 plan. This is the current zoning. It's a bit of an island all by itself there in the middle of multifamily zoning. And so regardless, current use of the site is not consistent with the zoning. There are several salons in the facility. It's kind of a hodgepodge building. To be honest, as we started looking into this, staff started thinking, okay, maybe we need to actually do a personal service establishment update, which is what a lot of ordinances went to since we last updated our ordinances in 1974. But rather than getting into that big of a discussion right now, the applicant actually, the owner of the property actually applied for a building permit to finish one of the last spaces in the building for a hair salon. It was I believe it's a one-chair salon, one person. Technically not permitted in the current zoning of PO. So trying to find the easiest path forward here, the request was, we suggested she apply for rezoning to commercial, see what the planning commission had to say about it. The planning commission, recognizing that the property eventually will redevelop and it's likely to redevelop in, consistent with the properties around it, which is multifamily zoning, to allow for this building to continue to be used the way it's being used. Recommended rezoning. Now, the applicant initially applied for commercial C2 zoning. Staff did point out to the planning commission you could do this just as well with C1, and so the planning commission recommended C1 zoning to the board. So they reviewed this in November and December, recommended approval, and it's in front of you this evening. The applicant apologizes for not being here this evening. She had what sounds like several, not just one, medical emergencies in her family in the last week, and so she's in Ann Arbor with family at the hospital right now, and so I told her that that's okay, we could probably handle the introduction by ourselves. But I'm happy to answer any questions at this time. Again, this is just the introduction. We will have to formally, this is just the introductory discussion, we will have to formally introduce it if the board chooses to move forward at the next meeting.
Board members, questions? Trustee Wilson?
Tim, I tried to figure out where this is. Where is it?
So this is the roundabout at Marsh and Hamilton. It's the property it's on the right-hand side.
Thank
There's a
you.
white building that sort of sits up on the road on the
Yep.
left side of the driveway.
know the property.
Bigger white building on the right.
So is C1 a higher use than C2?
No, it's a lower use.
C1 is a lower use.
Our numbers go up, so C1 is the
Right.
least intensive, C3 is the most intensive.
So you're coming forward with C1, the lower use, correct? Okay, and is a use by right, I see, because it's personal service
It
establishment.
would fall into the personal service establishment in C1,
Okay,
yes.
good. But you say that this property ultimately you want to see redeveloped as multi, because I know there's multi to the northeast of it.
To the east is multifamily, to the northeast is the church, to the southeast, there's another office building. This area is just kind of a bit of a mishmash.
Yeah.
The future land use map is multifamily in the area, I think, with the intention more so that as you get further to the northeast, there are a couple of other office buildings, a duplex and some other
Right.
buildings that may be redevelopment candidates in the future, and that would be a good opportunity. So while we didn't find any specific discussion of this in the 2017 plan, it appears as though that's what they were shooting for, was sort of, this might be an area where we could see some redevelopment, this site potentially even. Not sure why it was rezoned to PO, really. We looked through the file on that. I think they were, if I'm guessing, I think we were trying to address a similar problem back when we rezoned it to PO, that the uses they had in the building weren't consistent and they were trying to use the building. And so
Yeah.
this is probably, from staff's perspective, this is probably our best bet until we see redevelopment of the site.
So what I'm reading is that staff suggests not updating the future land use map at this time, even though this is out of conformance with the future land use map.
Correct. This is a situation where we would recommend we keep the future land use map as sort of the long-term vision, as opposed to trying to connect it to the current use. There's several of these areas throughout the community.
Yeah.
Where we see something more in the future than what is there now.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Hendrickson?
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I presume when it was rezoned from whatever residential zoning to PO, the uses that were in that building were not available by right in residential zoning.
Yeah, as far as we can tell, it was an issue at that time of addressing nonconformity. So to do the initial address of that, it was to rezone it to PO based on what was in the building at the time. But, it's a small multi-tenant building, users turn over pretty frequently. And so staff is of the opinion this is probably the better way to approach it so we don't run into this problem again in the future.
So this property, and without trying not to create spot zoning,
Right.
in which this isn't necessarily, would connect to commercial across the street, but it's close. My question would be, was there any consideration for a mixed use on this property? Since mixed use core is in the designation across the street from where this property is located.
So again, there was no intention on staff's part or the applicant's part to address the future land use map at this time.
Right.
But if it gets rezoned to commercial, they could do a mixed use project on this site in theory, because they would have the zoning, future land use calls for multifamily, and so naturally you could marry those two up, I think, pretty easily.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Clerk Guthrie?
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I'm sorry, could you explain that when you say merge these pretty easily? What do you mean by that?
So the future land use calls for multifamily uses on the site, so I think there's an intention at some point in the future there'll be redevelopment in this area. If the underlying zoning is already commercial, the main avenue to mixed use in our ordinance is a commercially zoned property to do an MUPUD. And so that's the main avenue under our current ordinance to get to mixed use. And so this would then sort of would fall into best of both worlds. They're going toward, if they did a mixed use project in the future, they'd be going towards what the future land use wanted and using the existing zoning.
So, I'm sorry, I'm not understanding why not just make it mixed use now. You can't because you need the commercial designation first?
Right now, there is no intention to change the land use map. All we're looking at this point is the zoning map, because the zoning map currently designates it as PO, professional office, and to allow the uses on the site, we're proposing to rezone it to C1 commercial. The future use of the site and the future land use map is just there for reference at this point.
Okay.
I have one question. When you refer to the master plan, the future land use map, the zoning map, okay, so I get the zoning map is current, but I got confused about which future land use map and which master plan you were referring to in developing your standards for the decision and the recommendation.
Yeah, so until the board adopts an update to the master plan, the current master plan for the township is the 2017 master plan.
Okay.
And the 2017 future land use map.
Okay, great. Board members? Your inclination toward this rezoning request?
I'm inclined to support it.
Okay, it looks like we have a consensus, so you will introduce it.
We'll bring it back to the next meeting for a formal introduction, and probably try and follow up with the applicant, and just understand her timeframe too.
Okay.
Because I think she would very much like to be here.
But
if
in
possible.
reading the accounts from the planning commission, I think there was some contention about C1 versus C2. Because C2 is what she originally asked for.
Correct. I think the planning commission really just wanted to understand the scope of the differences between the two. And it actually has kind of led to something that I think we're going to do going forward on rezoning requests, and something that I've done previously in my career is, provide a more direct comparison to the planning commission of the proposed versus the existing, so that they can really apples to apples compare what
Right.
we're looking at.
And that seems important to me because you note that the planning commission does not have to stick to just either what it is and what the applicant asked for. They have other options, and that's in my mind, a point that is that should be reemphasized in more cases.
Absolutely.
Okay. So we'll look to see this again in the next few weeks.
This will be back in the future, yes.
Okay. If we finish with that, then no more comments with that, we go to item 13B. Under discussion is the 2023 master plan update. And obviously, that's why Mr. Schmidt is standing in place.
I just really like standing here. It's a good spot. This is a culmination of the last about 16, 18 months' work between the planning commission and planning staff. This is the draft of our master plan update. So just by way of background, for those of you that have not gone through this process before, under Michigan enabling legislation, every 5 years you're at least required to review your plan. Many cases, communities simply put it up for public hearing on their planning commission and determine that nothing needs to be done. But it's at least required that you look it over. At that point, you can either elect to start the planning process or say you've reviewed it and there's no changes necessary. The Meridian Township had gone some time between updating their plan. So in 2017, it was a fairly major overhaul that was done of the plan. Early 16, late 17, it was adopted. And then you may recall, shortly thereafter, shortly in development years, the COVID-19 pandemic hit. And so as we were starting to get some progress on some of the goals and objectives and things in that plan update, development changed dramatically in this country, not just in this township. And so after talking to the planning commission, we really decided rather than do a complete rebuild, this would be an update to the plan. And so this represents that update. Communications department did a phenomenal job on this. I can't thank Rachel and Sam enough for their work on this. This started, my original concept for this was literally one page. Like, I had this idea in my head of how do we get our plan on one page, so it's an entirely graphical document. And we just got to realizing, and my staff tried to talk me out of it multiple times, and they finally got there, because the goals and objectives really, there's really three big things to any plan, right? The goals and objectives, which are the text version of the things you can't put in a map. This is what we want to see in our community. The future land use map, which is arguably the most important piece of it because it directs the future. It helps direct the zoning, it helps direct the development community to where we want to see development. So those two things. And then lastly, there's a bunch of other things that the state requires. You have to have access to a transportation plan, you have to recognize utilities, you have to, there's a couple other things I'm forgetting off the top of my head. But then in Meridian Township, we have a fourth thing that's very important that we adopted in 2017, and that's the urban service boundary. it is imperative, and I've said this since I started here, that we review that every 5 years along with the master plan, because if we don't, it leaves us more vulnerable to potential litigation. So, with that in mind, functionally, we have revamped the updated plan. Looks a little something like this. It even has the noise of you turning the pages. Each of these items in the table of content is actually linked out to the page that you want to go to, and there's a way to go back to them as you go. But I just want to briefly walk through this brief executive summary talking about where we're at, where we're going. Then we get into the goals and objectives. The previous plan had 7 top-line goals. So what I say is a top-line goal: strengthen and expand residential opportunities in this case. In talking to the Planning Commission, we shrunk those down to 5, combined a couple, got rid of one because it was really more day-to-day operation stuff that didn't need to be in the master plan, but developed these 5 top-line goals, and then under each goal, there's a number of specific, what we hope are actionable and trackable objectives. Because it's one of the complaints I would have with our previous plan, one of the complaints I have with many plans out there, that there is language in the goals and objectives that is impossible for me to tell you whether or not we met that or not, or whether we've done that or not, because it's just flowery language that's included. So what we've tried to do is very much make this actionable and trackable, so that over the course of the next 5 years, we can see what we've done and what the Planning Commission has done. So we have these 5 goals with their subsequent objectives underneath. And then we get to this, which is a series of, this is sort of the beginning of our implementation matrix, which is next step in the planning process. These were items that came up from the public, that came up from the Planning Commission, and staff pulled out of the old plan, that all were pretty specific, good ideas, but didn't really fit anywhere else. And so this was the way to start that discussion about the implementation matrix, by including them here as specific ideas that we can start looking into as we go forward. So then, this is the first half of the future land use map, is the future land use plan. This takes the designations of the future land use map and sort of tie bars them to the zoning ordinance. So you know what you're getting. If the ordinance says in this location, rural residential, you know which zoning designation that's going to equate to as we go forward. And then the future land use plan. What we did was, instead of trying to smash a map into an 8.5 by 11 magazine format, these are actually outgoing links that will take you directly to the map. So it's much easier this way from our perspective to be able to look at this rather than try and have it fit in the same format as the document itself. Functionally, there were a limited number of changes recommended to the future land use map by the public, by staff, by the Planning Commission. They're listed right here. We've listed all of them. I'm going to briefly talk about the 4, what I would consider the 4 important ones. 1, the Meridian Mall is proposed to be designated as a PICA to continue on our trend of potential intensity change areas that we adopted in 2017. So we would have essentially downtown Hazlet, downtown Okemos, Carriage Hills, and Meridian Mall property in direct environs. What we're proposing, one of the goals going forward, is to spin each of those off into a small area plan. There's a provision under state law that allows you to do a sub-area plan for any geographic area within your community, so you can focus on that area more. That's sort of what we started to do in the 2017 plan. What we'd like to do is build on that a little more, especially now that we're starting to see activity in Hazlet, especially as the conversations have gone on with respect to the mall, and as we need to give Carriage Hills a little more love going forward. So that is why Meridian Malls gets this designation now, so we can focus on it a little more. The vacant land to the east of Copper Creek, if you look at, I'll pull it up here real quick. So I have no idea that's weird. So the land right there, previously was designated rural residential. The proposed change would make it consistent with Copper Creek, consistent with the subdivisions to the north and south. And so We already have proposed stubs from Copper Creek going into this property, so it makes sense to keep it consistent with the development that's previously been approved. This is inside the urban service boundary. I'm not gonna move the map because I'm afraid of it right now, but the property, the Faith Lutheran Church property at 4515 Dobie Road, the church was involved from the beginning of this process to ask the planning commission to make a change to the northern third of the property. That's the vacant land to the north of the church that butts up against Chief Okemos Circle and the development that's there. They have asked the planning commission, and the planning commission is recommending that the future land use map be changed to multifamily developments be consistent with Chief Okemos Circle, which will allow the church to sell that property off for potential development. The church, my understanding, I was not here, but I've read the files. My understanding is the church came forward with a similar request to rezone that previously, and it was turned down because the future land use map was not in compliance. And so that is the change that's being sought. The church is fully on board with this. This is not the church going away. This is the church potentially selling off a small piece of their property. It's a very small piece. I think they're gonna have a very hard time with it, but I'm not a developer. I'm just here to get the map the way they need it to. And the last change to the future land use map is the driving range at Grand River and Powell Road. The owners of that property have also been very involved with this process. It is an existing commercial use and is currently designated for rural residential, which I have a very hard time with. They want it, they have been marketing the property for some time, are looking at potential development. And so the future land use map would change to commercial in this case, giving them access to potentially mixed-use project if they rezoned it to commercial and then went MUPUD route under one of the commercial designations. So those are the four sort of large changes to the future land use map. There's a couple other small ones that are listed in the plan that I'm happy to discuss. They're really more us cleaning up the map where we found some problems.
Mr. Schmidt,
Yes, ma'am.
is it functionally more difficult to go to mixed use from rural residential than from commercial?
Oh, yes. I would argue not possible under our current ordinances.
Okay.
And so again, this is the zoning plan, so this ties into the future land use plan that I talked about before. Future land use plan talks about the designations on the map, zoning plan ties it together with the zoning ordinance. Here we go. There's a couple of recommendations in the zoning plan. These are actually carryovers from the existing plan. Again, reduce the amount of residential designations, reduce the amount of commercial designations, really continue to try to move forward and make our ordinance more efficient. So again, we talked about the PICAs briefly, but our staff's plan and planning commission seemed on board with, and they're gonna start working on one of these soon, is to spin these off into small area plans. Functionally, to us, these are, 4 to 10 page documents, maps, up-to-date demographics, more detailed information. They essentially become marketing pieces too, that we can use when we get interest from people that, hey, this has been vetted by the community, it's been vetted by the planning commission and the board, go forth. And then lastly, well, not lastly, but the last big piece is the urban service boundary. So again, highly recommended that we review this every 5 years. There are 2 changes proposed. One is a record keeping issue because I hate it when lines on maps are cutting through other lines. And so there are 2 properties on Green Road that the drawer of the previous map got lazy and just cut them in half. And so it's a silly little technical thing, but I really wanted to fix it. And so planning commission's point was, well, reach out to the owners and see what they want to do. So we did, and the current map represents what the owners want. One of them wanted to be in, one of them wanted to be out, so it worked out just fine. Probably not the change anyone wants to hear me talk about, though. The second change, which staff would recommend, and the planning commission did recommend as well after some discussion, is the change along Powell Road. So the current boundary along Powell Road is along the eastern right-of-way line of Powell Road for a portion of it, and then it includes the Silverstone development, and then it comes back out to Powell Road, then it goes back and includes portion of the property at the corner of Grand River and Powell, and then goes back. And then, once it gets to the south side of Grand River, shoots all the way over to Cornell Road. We're not proposing to take it over to Cornell Road. That doesn't make any sense. Because one of the things I learned in college, one of the things that one of my professors has burned into my head, is God doesn't make straight lines, humans do. And so there is a straight line right there ready for us to grab, to make a very defensible edge of our urban service boundary. What it does, what staff is recommending, what the planning commission ultimately also recommended, is to move that line to essentially run down the rear of the parcels that front on Powell Road. So that way you have, functionally you have three things happen here. One, you include the entirety of the Grand River frontage that's currently commercial in the boundary. Would recommend, given that portion of it was and a portion of it wasn't previously. Two, we have utility and stub streets close to, if not punching into, some of these properties, which we previously said we were not going to serve, even though we required a developer to provide service to them. That's problematic in a number of ways, and we would recommend eliminating that. Thirdly, the current plan has an exception built in for properties that were part of an SAD prior to that urban service boundary, that they could still connect even though they were outside of the urban service boundary. And although the litigation surrounding that is gone and the SAD is gone, it's bad practice to include that large of an exception for something that is we are one of the few communities that do this. We need to make sure this is legally defensible. And so this would eliminate that exception completely. Lastly, and the thing that really I would hang my hat on, frankly, is it treats all the properties on Powell Road the same. If you're on Powell Road, you're this way. It does not extend it to Cornell Road. There's no intention to extend it to Cornell Road. It would cost us a lot of money if we ever wanted to do that. And I would never recommend that because the utility extensions just aren't feasible to do that, especially with the force main that goes out to the Catholic Church. So in many ways, this firms that boundary up as hard as it's going to get. And it gives us a much easier thing going forward because now we don't put stub streets to the east because we don't want to serve to the properties to the east. It is just Powell Road and that's it. And so that's the main change to the urban service boundary. The remainder, I forgot, this is our fun little new thing. We did add one thing to the plan because this is something that I started, I've done this a couple times in my career, my senior planner's done this once in their career as well, that it's kind of a fun, unknown, but it did a very good job of getting us to understand, how many lots are available, how many just scattered site lots, random lots and subdivisions that left behind, there's still one lot left or two lots left. And so we're gonna build on this. The Planning Commission is really interested in this piece. So we're gonna start building on this more and more over this year and next year, potentially eventually adding commercial space as well to see, okay, what kind of commercial space is left? Again, though, I would point out, most of this data is leading us towards, we are moving towards more redevelopment than actual greenfield development. So just keep that in mind. And then the last thing I'll point out is these are some of the things that we didn't want to get into a ton of detail on because there's really good other documents out there that talk about these. The natural features in the community, the transportation network, this is a required feature that we talk about this, but we didn't need to get into a whole lot of detail. And the existing infrastructure, as I mentioned, is required to be reviewed. And so there's a picture of what my daughter likes to say is where daddy's work is. And that's the plan. And so we're pretty pleased with how this came out, and we'd be happy to answer any questions. I know this is a lot, and this is sort of the first discussion. We just wanted to get it in front of you. And we will work with the supervisor in the future to schedule further discussion and with the eye towards eventual adoption, because the Township Board in Meridian Township has taken the authority of adoption on. So it is your plan to adopt.
Guthrie?
Thank you, Supervisor Jackson. First, I want to thank the Planning Commission for their work on this and thank staff for their work on this and thank previous planning commissioners for their work on the current master plan that we're using. And also thank you to the communications department for putting together such a lovely brochure or master plan, easy to understand, easy to read. It breaks it down in a much more manageable way for the general person to be able to understand it. And so I appreciate that. I did notice in the memo, it did say something about the master plan being digital, not on print. We do in the clerk's office keep a few documents in there, print documents. One is the master plan, one is the 5-year Parks and Recreation plan, and one is the budget that we have in the entryway of the clerk's office. So once this is adopted, we will have this in a print form. So I just wanted to clarify that, if anybody in the public actually read the packet, that we will work with the planning department and making sure that we have a print copy on hand. I want to thank you and thank the planning commission for fixing that property, for the proposed fix to the property next to Faith Lutheran. I grew up kitty corner from Faith Lutheran, and it makes complete 100% sense. I know that area very well. I used to walk down to 7-Eleven all the time when it used to be there, buying a bazooka, piece of bubble gum, what I could afford, candy. So I'm happy to see that change in addition to the change with the driving range. And I'm looking forward to including the Meridian Mall as a PICA zone. I think that will serve the mall well and serve the planning department and economic development team well in what we can do in this core area of our township. In addition, I was concerned about the urban service boundary, and listened to public input about it, and we heard some public concern at our listening sessions. But in reading the master plan document, I am in agreement with the proposed changes to the urban service boundary. One of the reasons I'm in agreement with it is because I completely understand the need to fix a little teeny tiny boundary line, because that's something that I've had to do with boundary lines in the clerk's office. I have 3 houses that have been trying to get the state to move. That was a mistake by the state, and been trying to get them to move for 4 years. And it's just a little teeny line to get people to vote in the right area, and they're in the wrong spot. So I get it, it makes sense to fix it. And through this whole process of what I've had to do in my own department, I completely understand what you're up against in your department and what, and any inclusivity that people are looking for in that area, and how that line goes around and excludes a little section over there. So, so while I was initially not very fond of it, I am happy to see that change in the master plan. And I don't have any negative things or opposing things to say at this time, or any changes, recommended changes. I just wanted to give my input about the things that I'm happy to see change for the future land use in the master plan.
Okay, Mr. Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. So I'm just going to say ditto to all the thanks, so we don't have 7 of those. 7 variations on that. I think a lot of work went into this. So I really just have a couple of general questions, which is, how does something exit being a PICA? As you point out in the plan, Hazlet is seeing a lot of construction started. There's a plan in place for what I believe to be, as I understand it, the totality of the PICA area. When that project is done, do we say, job well done, no longer a PICA, or do we keep it listed as that in the 2028 version of this plan?
So So the Hazlet Peak actually covers all four corners of that intersection.
Okay.
So this will we're essentially knocking out a quarter of the Pica in theory with Hazlet Village Square and American House. To answer your question more directly though, it's as simple as us saying, okay, we wave our magic wand and it's no longer a Pica because it's a self-created designation that we're using for more intense planning focus for those areas. And when we believe as a community that focus is no longer warranted, it goes back to whatever designation we so choose. At that point, we probably call it mixed use core and move on.
Okay. I like the idea of the small area plans to go along with those because I think that's a bite-sized way of chewing on that, the planning regarding those areas. The area that had, in reviewing this and thinking about those, I don't want to leave one area out, and I think worthy of consideration, which is the western boundary of the township on Grand River to the Park Lake Railroad Bridge. I think there's a lot influx in that area. There's a lot of change that comes around. It's also got one of the only industrial areas in the township as well. I wonder if it wouldn't be prudent to look at that for it was also at one time, years ago, being looked at as a possible test area for form-based code, which may or may not happen, but point is, it is a node, if you will, in the community. And it might be something worth considering if that area also merits a small area plan. But everything else is excellent that I've seen in here. I think the changes to the future land use map make sense. I think the urban services boundary changes are relatively unobjectionable. I know we did hear from some residents, as the clerk pointed out, about that. But I think if everyone got the 5-minute discussion that you just gave us on the urban service boundary changes, I don't think they'd be in opposition to those either. So maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe we'll wake up with 30 emails tomorrow. But I think that it makes total sense what you've suggested here.
Trustee Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. Tim, I have two specific questions about the urban service boundary at Powell Road.
Yes, ma'am.
The first is those two parcels that will gain the greatest benefit of being now within the urban service boundary. Are those parcels owned by the same property owner? And do you know how much acreage is involved over there?
I don't, but I can follow up on both of those questions. I can
Okay.
tell you that they are definitely not all owned by the same property owner.
Okay.
Give me just a second. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Can you put it back up on the screen,
Yeah, I
please?
can actually. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I am on page 28.
It's almost at the end.
Should be right there. Did I get it? No. Oh, let's see.
28.
There we go. So what we're talking about here is there are these 3 properties right here, which I believe there are 2 owners there. There's 1 owner here on this property. This is owned by the school district.
Oh, that's the school property.
Didn't even mention that argument.
Yeah.
The amount of time I spent trying to figure out if the urban service boundary actually applies to the schools.
Does it?
I don't know.
You're not going to develop it anyway.
And then it would bring
my
in the
lifetime.
driving range, this small parcel where the driving range building
Where is the driving range? That was my second
It
question.
is this L-shaped piece. Right now, only the horn is in. Now the whole thing would be in.
So then
That's the
they,
building, the driving range.
okay,
And then there's one little parcel over here that's separate. So I think, if I remember correctly, there's 6 different owners, but we can follow up on who those are.
that was my question because developing commercial and now we can provide water and sewer within the urban service boundary.
Yeah, and it's a bit of a misnomer with the urban service boundary. It was not that it can't develop.
Yes,
It's that we weren't gonna provide water and sewer, but we had stubs of water and sewer and streets to these
right.
yeah, so. Yes, we will follow up on acreage and number and
Thank
names
you.
of owners.
Great, thanks.
Mr. DeShane?
Thank you. Tim, a couple questions. Consolidating C1, C2, and C3 into one commercial district, why were they set up as separate to begin with? And so what control did we lose by consolidating them?
So let me start by saying, we're not entirely sure it's possible, especially the C3, because the C3 is the mall and the surrounding environs. And it really is such a different animal than the other two. The best case might be cleaving them into two districts.
Okay.
The differences between, so historically, what communities did was your lowest density commercial was sort of your cross streets commercial, your Park Lake and Grand River, your Hazlitt and Marsh, Hazlitt and Oakness, things like that. The middle density commercial is what most communities started doing as car culture expanded. That's your traditional suburban strip mall kind of setup. And then your highest density commercial is the mall, is the big boxes, is stuff like that. So you can see why that one is a lot different than the other two. And so, I think if I will say when we come forward with the change to the commercial districts, it's likely to be more on the C1, C2 side rather than the C3, because changing the C3 is a big monster. Not to say we don't want to make some changes to it, and there will be some flicks on the edges, but I think making wholesale changes to combine them all as one is probably not feasible.
Okay. Second question, this new category of transitional residential. It sounds like it's like suburban residential, but it's closer to a PICA. Is that the biggest?
So yeah, we were trying to figure out a way to name this, because the current plan, let me flip to it here real quick.
Could you bring that page up too, please?
I can try. I'm gonna have to go to a separate document here. Give me just a second. So the current plan is R1, R2, or R1, R2, R3, with some designations regarding the density expectations. First off, planners tend to like things a little more descriptive than just putting numbers on a piece of paper. And so this is what staff came up with to try and outline the differences between the two. And so what you're looking for is this. And zoom in here, do a little bit of this. So these are the current designations. And so what we would be recommending we go to is the rural residential, the suburban, and the transitional. The transitional is the high density. It's the stuff that's more adjacent to commercial or adjacent to multiple family. The suburban residential is the vast majority of the township, and the rural residential is really what's focused on the eastern third of the township, although there are other areas of it.
The word transitional is problematic only because of, I'm not going to name anyone in particular, but a former clerk used to call rental housing transient housing, okay? Which was, these days, is a huge insult to what has become the major new development in our community. So I'm leery of that word transitional and its association with transient, because people who live in rental housing today are doing it by choice because they don't have the tax incentives they used to have. They like the carefree living, and our developers have seen that, and that's why virtually every development project we've seen, multifamily, has not been, no condos at all have come to us, no owner-owned, it's all been rental. So that, if you can keep wordsmithing that one, I would like to possibly look at other words rather than transitional. But I'm still not sure why we need to separate that, because it's a PICA from typical suburban residential. You mentioned that accessory dwelling units would be encouraged in the area, but I think we're going to encourage accessory dwelling units in suburban residential as well.
Yeah, so the transitional residential isn't designated, it doesn't tie into the PICAs. It's the higher density single family. It's the RA, which is the smallest single family district we have, and the RB and RX, which are the duplex districts. So it's just intended to show that step up again. But
More of intensive residential?
yeah, so we'll wordsmith that a little bit. That's a good point. I wasn't aware of that history.
Other than that, I agree with Clerk Guthrie and Trustee Hendrickson. I like what you've done. I like the format you've done it in. Kudos to our communications department. This is a much more accessible document than past master plans have been, certainly than the 2017, which, was a 5-pound document. It was really, really big. I also like the explanation of the urban services boundary. Urban services boundary is kind of the third rail in Meridian Township. You don't dare touch it lest you be electrocuted, okay? And so we're not touching it, we are cleaning it up and making it consistent. It shouldn't run through a property owner's line, and we're not, in any ways, abandoning the idea of keeping as much of the eastern third of the township rural as we have been in the past. It's a good idea, it's one that this board supports, and making minor technical changes to it is in by no means a threat to what has been done with the urban services boundary. I like the idea of reducing the number of residential zoning classifications as well. We have so many of them that, unless you're on your staff, I'm sure it's difficult to keep them all straight, and maybe even your staff does.
I can't keep them all straight. I have to look every time.
Thank you. Other than that, good work. This is a very accessible document, and I think this introduction will be very good for us to have a more thorough discussion of this at our next meeting.
Other comments? I have some comments and some questions. I agree with the commendation of the change in the look of the master plan. I like it. There's actually several things that I'm a little concerned about. So, first of all, I'm surprised there's no mention of form-based code that I found anymore.
So, I mean, form-based code again would be a way to implement the goals and objectives of the master plan.
Right.
For better or for worse, it still exists. It's not as much in vogue anymore because it tends to work better around transit hubs and things like that. But it is not a part of things, but because it's a zoning, not a planning piece, it's more of an implementation piece that would come out of this.
Okay. Okay, I'll take that. Is there a time limit for our adoption?
Nope, not at all. I mean,
Not even in relationship to the redevelopment ready program?
so that would have been my only caveat is that in state law doesn't have any provisions. There's no penalties if we don't adopt it, right? The redevelopment ready to maintain our certification, though, this functionally is the last piece to get our certification as one of the only townships in the state, if not the only, to be a full-fledged member of that program. So, yeah, at some point, there's going to be a time crunch when some grant program comes up that requires us to be part of the RRC, but I don't need you to adopt this at the next meeting or the first meeting in February.
Okay.
But sooner rather than later, so we can start to get to work on it.
Okay. But if we don't, that won't stop you from starting.
Well, I
to
mean,
work on it.
clearly, we've already brought forward the accessory dwelling unit piece. I mean, we're gonna
Yes.
mark that one off the second we adopt the plan, which is great. It's good to hit the ground running.
Okay. One community preference from way back was this idea of the balance between owner-occupied and rental property. So I haven't read this as carefully as I will, but I didn't hear any mention of that as a goal in the township. And in discussions even about the possible development at Park Lake, there were comments about rental property and promoting and building more ownership property, more property that could be owned. There is no deference to that preference in this document. Are there ways in which we could build it in? so that we are less welcoming to rental property, regardless of who lives in it, as opposed to owner-occupied property on the land that is available.
Off the top of my head, sure, we can think about that a little bit. I think there's a couple of things here, right? So there's a limited number of properties left to develop, period. We know that. Of those, the number of them that allow multifamily uses, I can probably count on one hand. In fact, I know I can.
Okay.
Park Lake was one of them. It's in fact, I believe it's the only one that's vacant in zone multifamily right now.
Okay.
There are a couple other ones that are planned for multifamily. It would require redevelopment, and that's a bigger lift. So there are far more properties available for single-family development than multifamily development.
Okay.
Especially, now, the flip side of that, though, is as we start this, to transition ourselves conceptually to a redevelopment, a more redevelopment-oriented community, you don't redevelop to single-family. It financially doesn't work. In fact, we're not even a community where you can buy a house and tear it down and build a McMansion because it financially doesn't work. Because our houses have maintained their value enough, and there's not like a neighborhood where someone could come in and buy 1,000 square foot post-war Cape Cod and tear it down and put a 3-story McMansion in. And so I think what we're seeing is really an evolution of us as a community writ large. That we had years and years and years of our building official pulled out his unofficial tally of how many permits, because January, and how many permits we've issued every year back to like 25 years, so 88, I believe was his first year. And we were issuing hundreds of permits every year for single-family houses, which is unheard of nowadays. No one around the state does that even. So I think what we're seeing really is a transition in the market, a transition of us as a more mature community where we need to go in and fill in those gaps. There's still the easy single family, I say easy, there's still the single family projects out there, the Copper Creek, the Silver Leaf, potential for there's a couple other properties out there that could in theory handle a larger number of single family houses, but the majority of what's left is stuff that's on a main street or it's something that's a redevelopment. And so you're going to redevelop it into mixed use or multifamily or something like that. I don't have the numbers in front of me, what the percentage is and how that's moved over the years. That's something we can look into too and just see what that trend line looks like. But I suspect that we're not that much out of line with communities that are similar to us in terms of what our percentages are.
Okay.
It's just my sense, because the market's changed.
And one last question, in reducing the number of categories for residential uses, do we provide more locations where we can do the mixture of singles and duplexes and triplexes and the like, or not?
Not yet. So where we're at now is still more of I would call it a cleanup of having 9 single-family districts for a while there. And so I think we're down to 7 now, if I remember correctly. We really like to get to 5, but the next 2 are going to be heavy lifts, right? They actually involve rezoning properties. So like if we push it beyond this, it's going to be a bigger deal. What I think, to your point, when getting into some of that, missing middle infill type projects, in my mind, and something we've talked about internally, is that probably is going to require us completely revamping like the RX or something to allow for sort of these new housing types that have started popping up. And we've started to address that with the ADUs, right? And we've started to see that. We've got one starting in the wild. But to get to some of these other ones, our ordinance, drawn and written up in 1974, doesn't address modern housing needs 50 years later. And so we need to catch up in some ways to allow some of that stuff that you're talking about.
Okay. Thank you. Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. how do you address in a master plan, housing for people who are transitioning from a house to a apartment that they can purchase and not rent? Because we have a lot, we don't really have, like, the proposal in downtown Okemos and in Hazlet is all rental. There's no multi-family purchase. When I see that in downtown, I see that in East Lansing, I see that in a lot of places across the country. But we don't, or maybe I'm wrong, I don't think we have any of that.
No, and there's a lot of things that work. There's not a silver bullet I can tell you right now. I can tell you a couple things though. That the plan, one of the goals and objectives is to amend to the conversation we were just having with the supervisor, to amend the ordinance to allow the increase in missing middle housing, like duplexes, like quadplexes, things like that. Secondary piece of that is most of those projects are highly subsidized now, especially in downtowns. They require a substantial amount of capital investment. I can also tell you that in 2007, 2008, banks stopped loaning on attached condos. Like there was a period of time there you couldn't buy them, you couldn't build them because no one would finance them until the entire project was done. And then you could finance individual units. Well, no builder is going to take on that entire financial burden on their own. So it became a chicken and egg, and no one's building them anymore. There's very few people building sort of townhouse style units in Michigan, especially now. The other piece is there's not a whole lot of places, there's very few places in our zoning ordinance that allow them. So there's a lot of things that we need to do as we move towards these other types of housing. One of the things that we did include in some of the first goals was to encourage new mixed-use developments to direct that density where we want it to go so we can maintain our single-family districts, to have better, a wider range of residential densities so you can get some of these different projects that might need a little more density than a traditional development would have. The ADUs we talked about. So there's language in there that allows us to start attacking it, but there's no silver bullet. I'm not gonna fix this problem for you overnight. I wish I could. I wish I could fix affordability because it's mildly depressing sometimes as a planner, seeing how expensive houses have gotten. But that is a macroeconomic problem that we need to move the needle as much as we can locally, but we're not gonna solve it locally.
This master plan provides guidance.
Yes.
For that to
Yes.
happen. Okay. And then in regards to, on the last page, it talks about infrastructure. And it mentions AT&T and Comcast. And in one of the first pages, it talks about broadband for the entire community. But I don't really see a guidance in the master plan for how that's addressed in regards to planning. Is that something that can be addressed in planning, or is this just a statement that we're putting in the master plan that we want this, but what is, how are we making it?
So I think from a broadband perspective, the master plan really is more of a set the plate kind of document for that. The actual promotion of better broadband access is going to come through policy, is going to come through partnerships with those utilities of how do we get that to the areas of the township that don't have the service. The master plan can say we want to expand it, but it's the implementation piece that's outside of the master plan that's really going to make that happen.
Okay. And then it also talks about the green space plan. And I think it said that the last green space plan was in 2004,
Yes, ma'am.
if my memory serves me correctly.
Correct. That is one of the things that is one of the goals is we are recommending that we tackle an update to that in the next 5 to 7.
5 to 7 months?
years. So we work in years, we don't work in months. So the plan, just, and I probably should have led with this, a plan like this is intended to be looking out 20 years, 30 years, long scale. Because, the arc of history bends the way we plan for it now. And so we're trying to look ahead as far as we can reasonably, because I don't know, maybe 3D printed houses take off. It's an interesting concept. I've seen it. I know how it works. Not my cup of tea, but maybe it is. Maybe it becomes the next big thing. What we need to do is be able to be agile enough to address those things as they come up, address the ADUs more quickly, address the next big thing. And I think that's where the planning document is really just the big picture, and it's the policy, it's the zoning ordinance, the implementation pieces that get to those items, those specific items that you're talking about.
It would be nice to, and maybe I'll just reach out to Land Preservation Advisory Board, because there's been a lot of discussion about no purchasing any more land preservation. Who wants to purchase any more land preserves? Are we at our capacity? How much money does it take to manage land preserves? Because we know we need to manage it. So it'd be nice to have a guidance in that regard from the Land Preservation Advisory Board.
Yeah, and we, in talking to the former director Maisner, and there's you'll notice a couple of recommendations as it relates to the land preservation program, and trying to aid them in what is their next step. We don't know, but we can help them try. We can try and help them get there. That's what we're here for. We're planners.
I was in, I believe, an EDC meeting earlier this month, and we were shown a document, planning and development document.
Oh, the economic development strategy.
Yes.
So that probably needs a link in here now that it's pretty much done.
Okay.
What we've tried to do with all these outside documents, rather than try and recreate the wheel, what we're doing is, since this is digital, click this button, go touch that document if that's what you want. And so we can look into adding that as well.
Yes, because a part of the conversation, I believe, in that meeting was that there is a natural connection between what is being planned at that level and from your department and what is being promoted in the master plan. And I would think that would be a benefit to the board to see the two documents together as well.
Yeah, and I would, that's one of those, that is an implementation, to me, that's an implementation piece. That's a good vehicle to start making some of these things happen, is through that strategy.
Trustee Hendrickson.
Thank you. One thing is, talking about 20 years out, there isn't also a mention about, and this just came up in the last 6 to 9 months, the CIA TIF and what is being done with that, what the intent is for that. It might be worth, we can include one more link to a map and talk about what the goals are of the Corridor Improvement Authority. So as they relate to improving that area. I think since we're committing money to it, we're getting other taxable units invested in it. It's a 20-year commitment. It might be worthwhile to include that in here in some way as well.
Yeah, that is actually one of our goals, is to help update those documents. So, sir, yeah, we can absolutely get those linkages in here as well.
And if I'm not mistaken, we attached to the old master plan, what was it, the sustainability plan?
So it's a separate standalone document, and so what we've done here is we've linked out to it
Okay.
again. Yeah, that's, I believe that one's one of the last ones that's in here.
Okay, okay.
Please pages turn slow.
Yeah, page 40.
All right. Any further comments? Clerk Guthrie?
Sorry, I thought of one more question.
Okay.
I apologize. What's the master plan when these 425 agreements expire? Like College Fields, does it automatically become part of the township?
I would have to go back and reread how that document's written.
It's getting late, I'm sorry, I asked another question.
No, so typically, at the end of them, yes, there is a mechanism for how the agreement is dissolved. I don't know, and I would have to look at each one of them specifically to know.
So each one is different, each agreement is different.
In theory,
Different contract.
I'm not saying they are, but in theory, they could have different provisions. They probably do have different timeframes. What I can tell you, however, is typically, because 425s are set up specifically for development, there really is no long-term planning needed there, because by the time it comes back, it should have already developed. Otherwise, you're really not meeting the intent of the 425, and why is it still there? But that's,
So for instance, College Fields,
yes.
when it expires, it reverts back to Meridian
I will need
Township.
to- Yeah, I'll need to follow up on the specifics.
Does the water and sewer revert, does the township take control of the water and sewer? Like, what happens? I would like to know what the master plan is for those types of things.
Yeah.
Well
Happy to look
before it
into that in some more detail.
Yeah.
Yes,
I will add to that is, I tried reading it one time,
Oh, they're fun.
and it's not necessarily that it'll come back to the
Right.
township.
Correct.
actually,
The
yes.
agreement is essentially renegotiated for, and unless somebody has a good reason for it to come back to the township, it won't. And the tax sharing goes on into perpetuity with the renewed contract. I think that one was 25 years or something, but you tell us about how that goes.
We'll look into all of them. Yeah, I've seen them longer, shorter. Yeah.
But they do in fact have an impact and influence on what the master plan has to say about the future of the township. And I too would like to see some mention and clarification on that in the master plan. We have 2 or 3 of those in place at this
I
point.
believe there are 3, yes.
One on Dobie Road.
There are 4 then. Wait,
No, that's a
Dobie Road?
410.
That's a
yeah, that's a different one.
That's a different
410.
kind.
Different
Okay.
one.
Yeah, it's College Fields, it's the Abbott, Lake Lansing, and it's the Costco.
Yep. All right. Well, so you're going to come back to us for more discussion, or are we going to put this up for approval?
I think, Madam Supervisor, that we can have that conversation after M-Team next week and figure out what you'd like to do going forward.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
Mike.
Item 13C, Meridian Township, Delhi Township Standby Fire Agreement from our own fire chief, Mr. Mike Hamill.
Thank you, Madam
Please.
Supervisor Board. I'll be brief. This is an easy one. Every 3 years, we renew our contract. Basically, it's a memorandum, but a contract with Delhi Township. They contract with Aladdin Township for what we call a standby fee. And we have a designated area in Aladdin that we respond to for fires. And with that, our standby fee has been increased from $1,060 a month to roughly $1,866 a month. Additionally with that, if we respond to Aladdin for a fire, we get $900 per hour. And then after the first hour, it goes down to $600. If we respond to a structure fire, it ends up being nothing, we just charge them a small $90 fee for our battalion chief instead of for what we call a full alarm. So this is just a renewal of that. It's the increase is really the big thing, is the monthly fee is increased, but the hourly fee has changed, stayed the same. This contract will be good from January 1st of this year through the end of, I got my glasses on, I'm sorry, the end of 2027. So it's a 3-year contract. It's hard to believe that'll be 27, but. So that's really what I wanted to present to you. It's just, again, it's every 3 years we renew this, and that's where we're at, asking for you to consider renewing it. Questions?
Trustee Wilson.
Move to approve the agreement between Delhi Charter Township and Meridian Charter Township for fire and rescue services within Allen Township and authorize the township manager and fire chief to sign the agreement.
Are we ready for that? Mr. Duchesne?
It's not on the action, it's just a discussion item tonight.
Oh, sorry, there was a motion attached to it. Thank you.
Okay, so I think the question is, are we ready to pass on that at our next meeting as opposed to acting on it tonight?
I think we could put it in the consent agenda.
We could put it in the next consent agenda.
Okay? Everyone in agreement with that? Clerk Guthrie?
I just have one clarifying question. In the memo, it says 2026, but out loud you said
Let me make sure I
2027.
didn't
So I
do
just
that
want to
wrong.
clarify if it's 26 or 27.
Yeah, it's on page 2, I believe. Let me find it, I'm sorry. It's through 2027, so it's January
27.
1st of this year through December 31st of 27.
Okay, thank you.
Do we only have one of these kinds of agreements?
Yeah, they're the only one we contract with for, and again, it's a joint response between us and
Delta?
Delhi for a full,
Delhi.
what we know is a structure fire, but any alarms and things like that, it's also for extrications and car fires on the highway.
Okay.
So when you put this on the consent agenda for the next meeting, could you just make sure the memo reads 2027 and not
For sure.
26?
Okay.
Thank you.
Correct the memo, thank you.
And I'd also correct bullet 3 to $900 per hour. Right?
Okay, I don't have that form in front of me, but I will.
Okay. Because you indicated it was per hour.
Got it. It's just for the first hour, and then it's 600 after that.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, then we have no objections. We will expect to see that in the consent agenda at our next meeting.
Very good, thank you. Can I add one more thing?
Sure.
So if you didn't realize, for my partner in crime over there, today is National Law Enforcement Appreciation Day. So I wanted to throw that out there.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
We should have Meridian Township certainly appreciates both of you and your departments for all you do for us. Thank you.
Yeah, we couldn't exist without you. For sure.
Okay. We're finished with our board discussion items. We come to number 14, comments from the public. Are there members of the public who'd like to comment at this time? Mr. Nahum will say, I'm here, but I'm not talking. Seeing none, we move on to number 15, other matters and board member comments. Clerk Guthrie.
Quick comment. Treasurer DeShane and myself are sporting our teams here. Michigan, congratulations on the victory. The Lions, who were victorious, and let's hope they continue being victorious.
All right, yes, I will agree.
Thank you.
I will.
You don't have to add that to the minutes.
I will, at this time, if there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Support?
All in favor of the motion to adjourn, please say yes.
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 Opposed, no. Chair votes yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you.
Meeting adjourned.
Good night.